Welcome to another webisode of Avalon Voices. I'm here today with Janine Latus, the author of the New York Times and international bestseller, If I'm Missing or Dead, the sister story of love, murder, and liberation. In addition to her authorship, Janine is a fellow Virginian and an advocate for survivors of domestic and sexual assault. Janine, we know that almost a third of women homicide victims in the United States were killed by their intimate partners. But we still aren't talking about murder as a result of domestic violence. But you are. Can you recall when or how you decided that this was something you were going to change?
So it's pretty easy for me to understand exactly when I decided it had to change, because I had violence and coercive, controlling behavior in my own life, but I kept a shiny facade and I didn't tell my sister. And my sister then couldn't tell me because she was proud and she wasn't going to tell me. It's shameful to be the victim. And so if I had told my story, maybe she could have told hers and we could have gotten her out before her boyfriend killed her. And when you have something like that in your family happen, you've got two choices. One is to feel shame and shut down, and one is to just go out there and go, look, this is happening in our world and we have to stop it. And if the family members aren't going to stop it, then who's going to stop it? Because nobody cares more than we do. And so that's when I started paying attention to how many of these sudden outbursts, he just started killing people for no apparent reason, are domestics. I can read something in the paper and somebody got killed at a facility somewhere or at an event or a school, and the first thing it's going to be a domestic, and 2 days later it's a domestic.
What happens in the home stays in the home. That way of thinking is really the product of old laws that refused to prosecute family matters and protected abusers by shaming their victims. That thinking is still ingrained in our culture, even though those laws aren't necessarily the standard anymore. And you've said that this idea is getting us killed. What have you identified as the dangers of the thinking, what happens in the home stays in the home?
So for a long time, it was a really strong belief. What happens in the home stays in the home. The problem with that is then you don't have anybody to give you perspective on whether what you're seeing is healthy or unhealthy behavior. And you probably know this, but perpetrators are controllers. They control, they create controlling situations. And one of the things they do is they will isolate the victim. And so, I don't want you talking to people of the gender that you find attractive. That's frightening for me. I don't want you to talk to your friends because they're a bunch of man haters, woman haters, whatever. You don't need to go see your family because we're a family now. And pretty soon your life is this big and there's nobody saying to you, so when she talks to you that way, it's kind of rude and belittling and I'm not sure why you're putting up with it. Or when he grabs you by your arm and yanks, that's actually abuse. If you can't tell people what happened, then you can't get other people to help you understand that you actually don't deserve it. Most victims believe they deserve it. There is something that the perpetrator has found to mess with, an insecurity. If your insecurity is that you're stupid or you're fat or you're ugly or you're not a real man or whatever, your abuser will find that. They will find it during that glorious dating phase when they're learning everything about you. Oh my God, nobody's ever cared so much about me. And then they use those same vulnerabilities to control you. The idea that you don't tell anybody that what happens in the home stays in the home, it killed my sister. She didn't tell us the truth. You guys may know this, but my sister wrote a letter that was taped to the inside of the desk drawer at work, and it was addressed to the local sheriff's department. And it said, if I am missing or dead, pick up, and it named her boyfriend. And it described their fights, and it listed their debts. And it included the line, I hope someday to find this and think it's funny. But if I don't let him get away with it. And what makes me angry is that it was dated 10 weeks before she disappeared. So for 10 weeks we were talking about movies, our nieces and nephews, the weather, music, politics, and she never said to me that I'm scared. And since my book came out, I have heard from dozens of people. I have this letter, it's in the safe at work. I sent this letter to my mother and said, don't open it unless I'm missing. I sent this to my best friend. People write these letters. They know they're in danger, and they don't tell anybody else because we create shame around the idea of being a victim of abuse.
Janine, you tell people we have to talk instead of keeping the abuse and violence against us secret. Do you think that people can come to understand that there's a more powerful bravery in speaking out against the violence we experience rather than keeping our pain secret?
It gives me chills to have you ask that question, because when I was hiding it, I was in fear not just of the abuse, but that somebody would find out. And now that I speak out about it, there is not a day that goes by that somebody doesn't come up and say, yeah, that happened to me. And it happened to me 60 years ago and I've never told anybody. Or it happened to me 3 weeks ago and I don't know how to get out. But because I'm talking about it, they get to talk about it. And, you know, let's be honest, I have all the advantages. I am a highly educated white woman and everything in my life is an advantage. So if I'll be vulnerable, then maybe somebody with fewer advantages is free to actually tell their story and admit it. Like, maybe it's not your fault. Yeah, really, victims, if they have been in it for any period of time at all, believe it is their own fault. Yeah, and then if they break free, they're gonna have to tell people, and how embarrassing is that? I had my aunts kept saying to me, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I'm 100% sure." And then the book came out, and my aunts both came to me and said, "I'm really sorry I questioned you." Yeah.
If a person feels that they can't talk to a single person about the abuse that they're experiencing, is it somehow helpful to document the abuse? And do you know if there are any actual benefits to documenting a domestic violence or sexual assault against us?
So I would advocate for writing it all down for 2 reasons. One, less important reason, is because contemporaneous notes count in court. And so you have a better chance of being able to support your claims in court if you have written documentation that was contemporaneous to the abuse. The more important reason is it gets the hamster wheel out of your head. And when you look at it on paper and it happened on Tuesday and then it happened on Thursday and then on Friday something else happened, you're not exaggerating anymore. And when it's on paper, it's sort of like it's happening to somebody else. And you know that if your sister or your best friend came to you with the exact same story, you would say, "Hey, so this is abusive behavior, you need out." And when it's on paper, even though it is your own story, you start recognizing it for what it is if you write it down.
At Avalon, we encounter a lot of clients who can't even imagine telling the stories about the violence that they've experienced. We'll meet some people years after the violence, and they still won't have told anyone. Having survived the violence against yourself and your sister Amy, can you tell us how you were able to articulate your stories even when they were full of so much pain?
I was a writer, and so I write anyway in order to keep my head from falling off and rolling down the gutter. So the first thing I wrote that was published was 2 years after her death. And it was actually, I think, published 3 years after her death because it was held in inventory. But it was a big spread in Oprah magazine and it got a lot of attention. Yeah, and then I published my book in 2007, which was 5 years after Amy was killed. And actually next week is the 15-year anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm going down to spend it with my mother. I couldn't not tell my story. I could not let Amy die and have her just be forgotten. And by being able to use her story to help other people, that helped me heal enormously. It saved me in a big way. I didn't save Amy, but I wanted to save other Amys. And frankly, I wanted to save other Janines, you know? We deserve to be saved. It was tremendously difficult to write about my family and expose my family the way I did. But almost my entire family said, "You have to do it."
Really?
Yes. They read the manuscript before it ran, and one of my siblings asked for 2 really small changes, but they bravely said, "We will stand with you." Oh my God, I could not be more grateful. Yeah. But each one of us lost Amy. And so whatever each one of us can do, we will absolutely do. And so they gave me a lot of freedom to do this. People did the most amazing things, like this woman sent me a card that had cash in it, which is very weird for a death. She said, I want you to go buy a plant and put it in your yard, something that blossoms. It will always remind me of you, of your sister. Somebody sent me a gift card to a pizza place and said, if I lived near, I'd bring you a casserole, but I don't. So what do you want on your pizza?
That's so sweet.
It was just stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Bruce Springsteen was doing his tour, The Rising, which was the post 9/11 tour.
Wow.
Somebody sent me 2 tickets to The Rising, which is like a revival, and I'm just bawling, but everybody else around me is bawling too, so it's okay. It was remarkable.
Wow.
Yeah, people are very kind.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. And it's good to hear you saying that.
And I have to say this very clearly. When you ask for help, people will rush in to help. You might get some judgy pants who are going to say to you that you shouldn't leave, or give it one more try, or what God has joined, no man should put asunder. But mostly you'll get people saying, I have a futon,
Yeah.
or let me take you to dinner and listen to you, or how about if I watch your kids while you go talk to a therapist? I mean, people are very quick to rush in if you need help.
From this perspective, you're working to revolutionize the way individuals think about domestic violence. What are your hopes for men and women who read your book and listen to your talks?
My greatest hope in the world is that people remember this. Your partner is supposed to help you blossom into the fullest version of yourself. They're supposed to say, what are your wants? What are your dreams? What are your ambitions? How can we work together to get you to those? They are not supposed to make your world smaller and smaller and smaller until you are cowering, afraid. When the door opens, is it going to be a good day or a bad day? Are we going to be madly in love? Or will I have done something wrong and I have to apologize and I have to make up for it and I don't know what's going to happen and am I going to wake up in the middle of the night with that fist in my face? That's not love. Love looks like fulfilling yourself and becoming your best version of yourself. That's what I want people to understand. It's your right to be loved that way.